So Glenn, what the heck is it that you do for a living?
Well, what I've done is I've developed what I call a structured selling system. And the name of the system is Just a Yes or No Please, which is really the goal of every closing situation. In every sales cycle, your object is obviously get to the point where your client can make an educated yes or no decision on the product or service that is being offered. So what I did was I wrote one system that allows any product or service to be plugged specifically into the steps of the system, so that at the end I'm able to get a yes or no decision from an educated standpoint from any qualified prospect.
So is this like mind manipulation? I mean, is this like evil, that what you're doing here?
No, what I call it is questioning the clarity. My belief is that in so many situations, in life in general, but in sales in specific, the representative is very often guessing what the prospect is thinking, where I was always taught the best way to know anything about anybody is to ask them. So basically my questioning the clarity allows that the prospect will tell you what it's going to take to do business. Now I do add two programs into the mind part of my presentation. One is called neuro-linguistic programming and one is called visual motor rehearsal. What neuro-linguistic programming talks about is what you feed your mind is what you end up getting as a result from your mind. What visual motor rehearsal says is that if you practice and you polish what you do, you can make it so that your body just naturally presents that. One of the big tests that was shown to prove this was when the MRI was developed. They were able to see brain chemicals and the change in the brain under different stimuli. And what they proved with the Olympic class runners was that they could be hooked up to the electronic machines, each muscle, and their body reacts the same way when it thinks it's practicing or it's doing the practical. So what we were able to see is how important visualization and practice really is in accomplishing any feat well. So I then put these two programs into my selling system, which simply allow for the easiest and most satisfying selling experience for both the client and the representative, because it lays the groundwork honestly of exactly what will have to happen for that sale to be closed, for example.
So how long have you been in sales?
I've been doing closing of sales since I was 18 and a half years old. It's about 25 years now, and I was taught this system right out of the chute in my selling career. My first script I learned was 39 pages long, and it scared away most reps. Smart reps, though, understood the way that it was written was a lock. There were 50 questions in those 39 pages. When you got to the end, the prospect had already made their decision. It was just a matter of getting them to move to action. So I've actually used this system of sales for just about 25 years. And literally for everything from business to consumer sales, business to business sales, technical sales, non-technical sales, home improvement, high technology, programming, security, diamond companies, it really makes no difference. Any product or service can be fit into 3 spaces in my 12-step system, and you can, from that plugging in of the information, you can take the prospect to the close no matter what the product or service.
How long have you been teaching sales?
I had my first lead generator when I was 19 years old. I've either sold or managed people since that point.
So what kind of groups do you give these seminars to?
The seminars typically are given to groups of salespeople that are generating leads currently, but are not having a good success rate, what we call a closing ratio, which is the number of qualified prospects as related to the number that you close and put on contract. Very often we deal with companies that are having a 1 in 6 or a 1 in 5 closing ratio, and I'm generally able to move them to more like a 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 closing company, which could double a company's sales without any additional marketing. I believe teach the reps to maximize on everything that you've already invested in. Once they're closing at a much higher rate, then any owner of any business would invest as much as possible in lead generation. So I say don't spend any more money to generate more leads. Let's make all the representatives as proficient as possible. And the way that I do that is every sales organization has 1 or 2 stars. You have the guys that are just out selling everybody. Then you have a big group in the middle, which is mediocre sellers. And then you have the people at the bottom, really, that the company's just being nice by letting them stay around, frankly. I'm looking to affect that middle group, people who have already closed sales for the company. So we know they did it once, so they should be able to predictably do it again if we figure out what they did there. So what I do is what's called modeling. It's very important in sales. I take their 1 or 2 stars at the beginning of the workshop, and I model them. I actually question them to clarity so that the entire sales force can now see what is it that the stars are doing differently. We're all working the same number of hours. How are they outproducing me by double and triple? And using that model, I spend the rest of the day's workshop plugging this information into my selling system, my structured selling system. So I'm not really teaching them something new. I'm showing them how they're able to use what they're already doing effectively across the board.
So have you changed your techniques any in the last few years, or is it still pretty much the same stuff you were learning at 19?
Well, the things having to do with the mind and human nature and human reaction have matured as I've matured with the program. And as medical science has matured, we've learned a lot more about exactly how the brain works. So I'd say those are the main changes that I actually put into play, was the way that the mind reacts to certain stimuli. So now I know more of why what worked for me for years actually works. And it comes down to, frankly, that human nature is very predictable.